first question here is from Dean, and so he's so as we can see, he's really just setting up, some simple, basic, profit targets and stop loss, with some trailing capabilities here. And kind of here's the key question from Dean is he also wants to set up a exit condition here where, if the MACD crosses the MACD average line, then basically bail on the trade, right? If the so what this is, right? If the MACD crosses the MACD average, that's the histogram, right? So if the histogram is on the wrong side of the market, or I'm sorry, on the wrong side of the zero line, then close out the trade, right? Exit the trade there. So that's really kind of the key to this. But we'll walk through the entire process of setting up the profit target and trailing stop losses there. Okay. So with that, let's see here. All right, so I have BlackBird already up and running. So let's open up the order settings window here. All right, so when you're setting up your orders, right, the first thing you have to choose is your entry order, right? So the entry order doesn't matter for this question, so let's just go with the market entry. Give that a moment to load the menu up. There we go. All right, so now let's do the profit target first, right? So our profit target is going to be 48 ticks. So I will just use the 10 tick one here from the quick list to get started there. And then let's open that up, go into the initial placement, right? We can see right there it's set to 10 ticks. And then let's go and set that to 48 ticks. There we go. Right. So just remember, when you set up the long side, the short side sets itself up automatically. So the interface here, basically it reverses all of your entries for the long side here. So you can see the short side automatically put in a negative 49 for you automatically. So if you just focus on the long side, bottom line is the short side will set itself up automatically 99% of the time. So all right, so there's our target. Let's set the stop loss up next. So again, let's go down here and let's see here. I'm deciding if I'm going to use a trailing one. No, let's just start from, we'll make the trailing rules from scratch here. So I'm just going to go with the 10 tick. Again, start off with the 10 tick stop loss there, and then open up the menu, go into the initial placement, and right, so for stop loss, it's a negative number. So now I just need to switch it to 60 ticks, right? There you go, 60 ticks there. And now we'll get into the trailing rules here. So let's open up the stop loss, go into the trailing actions here, and we need to enable the trailing. So let's set the mode to custom. Right? So we're definitely building up some custom trailing rules here. And let's add a trailing rule. And let's see here. All right, so I'm just looking at the name here. All right, so when we're at 28 ticks, then we're gonna do a 48 tick trail. All right, let's open this up a little bit. There we go. All right, so this trailing rule doesn't kick in until we have 48 ticks of profit, right? So we're going to go into the trigger, and we will use the interval here. So the easiest and quickest way is we can use the interval, and we're going to use the ticks of movement here, right? So we're looking for 28 ticks of basically market movement in a profitable direction, right? So if you look at this list, you'll see there's lots of different options here for for monitoring price movement or maybe currency, like a currency value in profit or loss, things like that. So, all right. So yeah, using the interval is a quick and easy way to set this up. We do have a more direct way here. You could use the profit or loss trigger as well, right? Either one will work. So, all right. So that's all we're looking for is 28 ticks of profit there, and then the action is we're gonna move. Right. If you look at the type, it says move the order to. And so where are we moving the order to? It's going to be, so here's where things are a little different. So we're actually going to take the bar's closing price, right? So we're going to take the current close and then subtract 48 ticks, right? So normally people will, the normal trailing rules are usually you take the last price and then you subtract your offset for that trailing stop loss here. But instead, Dean wants to use the closing price of the bar, right? So there we go. So we're going to use the close of the bar, and then we're going to subtract 48 ticks. There we go. All right, so this is unique as well, using the close of the bar instead of using the market's last price there. So, and that does it, right? So just moving that stop loss, a little closer there is just a one-time action. Dean doesn't say anything about continuous trailing here. So now next, let's move on to the next step, right? So I guess, you could say this is the first step of moving the stop loss. And the second step here for moving the stop loss, right, we're going to move it a little closer. There we go. This time, the numbers are reversed here. So we're going to move that stop loss a little closer to 28 ticks at 32 ticks of profit. So, all right, let's open up our stop loss again. This time we're going to add a new trailing rule. There we go. All right, so at 32 ticks, we're going to move the stop loss to 28 ticks. Let's see, let's give that earlier trailing rule a better name here. There we go. All right, that name's a little bit better. All right, so again, we're going to go into the trigger here and set up that interval trigger. And we want to monitor again for ticks of movement. And this time we want to put in 32 ticks of profitable movement from the market. And then the action, again, I'm going to assume that we're going to use the close of the bar for this. So we'll change from the last price, there we go, to the closing price of the bar, and then put in 28 ticks. Yeah, was it 28 ticks? Yes, there you go. All right, so there we go. So we're taking the close, and then, we want to subtract. So, right, your stop losses are negative for a long trade. Your stop losses are negative, right? And then obviously vice versa. For a short trade, your stop losses would be positive. So there we go. So take the close of the bar and subtract 28 ticks, right? So there we go. There's our two kind of, normal or common stop loss, trailing, but not continuous trailing, stepping. So I guess you could call these kind of a stepping stop loss here. All right, now to the real key of the question here, which is to include this additional kind of exit condition based on an indicator, right? Based on the MACD here. So, all right, so let's open up our stop loss again. Let's add a new trailing roll. All right, so essentially, if the histogram crosses that zero line and there's two consecutive bars, right? That's also another key element to this is we need two consecutive bars, right? Two bars where that histogram crossed the zero line. So, right. So for the trigger, we're going to use the indicator value. Indicator value here. So you can think of the indicator value trigger like the threshold solver in Bloodhound. The price versus indicator, that trigger, think of that one as being similar to the comparison solver in Bloodhound, right? But keep in mind, these are not solvers, so they're not as powerful as Bloodhound, but they do the same basic function, right? So if we're looking for essentially what boils down to the MACD being on the wrong side of the zero line, right? That would be a job for the threshold solver in Bloodhound. And so for BlackBird, we can use the indicator value to do that. Now we need two bars, right? Two bars of that histogram being on the opposite side of the zero line. So we're going to have to switch to the Advanced tab down here. So the Advanced tab, right, allows us to add multiple triggers, right? So there you go. So I can add two indicator values here. All right. So the first indicator value, and let me open this up a little bit. There we go. All right. So the first one, let's plug in the MACD indicator here. So let's go find that MACD indicator. All right, there we go. There's the MACD. And of course, I'm just going to use the standard settings. And we want to use the histogram, or as NinjaTrader calls it, the diff, the difference. There. All right, so there's that. So that's our MACD. And hold on. There. And so for a long trade, right, I guess, normally you want the MACD greater than the zero line, or your histogram greater than the zero line, right, for a positive momentum. So I'm going to make the assumption here that if you're in a long trade, if the histogram goes less than zero, right, so in other words, the histogram goes negative, then that's your cue to exit the trade. And so for a short trade, we're going to reverse the condition here. So we're looking for greater than zero. Okay. And so for the first MACD condition, we're going to use bars ago 0, right? So that's going to be the MACD, the MACD histogram, for the current bar. Now the second indicator value here, and again, let's swap in the MACD indicator. There we go. Add that and select the difference plot again. There we go. There and there. All right. And again, we need to reverse the condition that we're looking for. So if that difference goes negative, right, less than 0, negative, or if it goes positive for a short trade, there you go. Now this time we're going to use bars ago set to 1, right? So bars ago is just essentially looking back, 1 extra bar, right? So bars ago 0, right? That's going to be the bar that just closed, right? The currently closed bar. And then bars ago 1 is going to be 1 extra bar back. So that is how we look for those 2 consecutive bars. Right? Oh, and lastly, the mode. We need to make sure that we have the right mode set here, right? So when you're mixing and matching, triggers together, right? There's lots of different ways that you may want those triggers to be evaluated. And so in this case, we need everything simultaneously. Yeah. So, yeah, we'll leave it on simultaneous. Basically meaning that we need this indicator value condition true and the second one true at the same time. So yeah, that should do it. Oh, sorry. Well, that does it for monitoring the MACD. So the last thing is we need to put in our action, right? And what is the action? Well, the action is exit the trade, right? So the type, we're going to switch that to flatten position, right? That is the action that we want here, is close out the trade, or in other words, flatten the trade, flatten the position. So, yeah. So, all right. That does it. Let's see. So let me see if there's any follow-ups on this. All right. Dean says, well done. Well, thanks for calling me a young man. I wish. Let's see here. Let's see. All right. Yeah. So there you go, Dean. Yeah. Just email in and request to get the raw recording up, and you should be good to go and watch it over the weekend. So yeah. All right. So it looks like Dean is satisfied here, and of course, Dean, I'm guessing you probably made it for the key component, which is, monitoring that MACD. I have a feeling that you probably know how to do the other, trailing stepping here yourself. So, but all right, let's see what else we got here. All right, so Eddie looks like he's amazed. Yeah, well, Eddie, it looks like you're going to have a lot of fun learning how to use BlackBird and discovering all the things you can do. So, and yeah, definitely a lot faster than writing your own code, trying to write your own custom strategy there. Mark has a generalized kind of follow-up question here. Right, so when you have a bunch of trailing rules, right, does it follow the order of those rules? No, because the order is set in alphabetical order, right? So if you click on the name, it's going to reorganize these rules here. Yeah, so there is no set rule here. What determines which trailing rule gets picked to use by BlackBird is the evaluate using, right? So at the very top here, there's evaluate using, and there's 4 different criteria that BlackBird uses to evaluate which trailing rule it's going to execute, right? So the typical one, right, the typical standard behavior for stop losses is always move your stop loss tighter and tighter and tighter to the market price, right? So in other words, the action closest to price, right? And so what is the action? Right there. The action column is what we're talking about, right? So the action column is what sets or calculates where the stop loss price is going to go, right? So BlackBird will calculate all the actions there and figure out what the stop loss price will be if that trailing rule is executed. and then based on the evaluate using, since it has all the prices pre-calculated, then it can go, okay, so I want to use the stop loss price that's closest to the market, right? So price, market, being interchangeable there, right? Or, if you want to create some kind of a, wonky reverse stop loss trailing, you could tell BlackBird, okay, use the trailing rule that calculates a price furthest from the market. Or, and then there's two other ones here, which is the first action to trigger or the last action to trigger, right? And so the first action to trigger is determined by the trigger, right? So the trigger sets prerequisite conditions before the trailing rule is evaluated. So these triggers have to be evaluated to true before a trailing rule is acted upon, right? So in other words, each trailing rule has to meet each of these prerequisites before the action can take place, or, well, before the trailing rule is even evaluated by BlackBird, right? So for example, this one in the middle, right, after 32 ticks of market movement, right? So in other words, the market has to move 32 ticks in a profitable direction before this trailing rule can even be evaluated, right? So in other words, this trailing rule is ignored until the trigger has been evaluated to true. So, right. So that's how the evaluation process works in a nutshell there.